old newspaper clippings or thumbing through dusty archives, wishing someone would just get to the good stuff.
Yeah, like those piles of research papers you just hope someone's already summarized, right?
Exactly. Well, think of us as your personal history decoders because today we're tuning into the fascinating world of early Nevada radio.
And trust me, this isn't your grandpa's radio hour. We're talking about the wild connections between silver mines, those undersea cables that connect continents, and, get this, the pioneers who brought radio waves to, well, the desert.
And we've got a treasure trove of sources to guide us. Historical accounts, first-hand stories, even a few of those, you won't believe this, anecdotes that make history come alive. Ready to crank up the volume on this deep dive.
Absolutely. Let's get those speakers crackling.
Now, when you think of Nevada, radio might not be the first thing that springs to mind. Heck, even I was surprised to learn about the link between Nevada's silver boom and the birth of radio.
Right. You'd think they were miles apart.
But it all starts with a name you might recognize from those history books. John W. Mackay, one of the big four of the Comstock Lode. Remember those Silver Kings?
Mackay wasn't just lucky, though. Oh, no. The man had a vision, a sixth sense for communication, you could say. While everyone else was blinded by silver, he saw something bigger, something that could connect the world.
So instead of just sitting on his fortune like a dragon on a pile of silver, he took a gamble on this newfangled thing called telecommunications.
We're not just talking about a few telegraph poles here and there. We're talking about a global network, a web of communication stretching across continents. Think transatlantic cables, undersea lines humming with messages.
He went head-to-head with the giants of the industry, too. Jay Gould, Western Union Mackay, wasn't afraid of little competition.
Competition. He thrived on it. By the early 1900s, his company was the king of the hill, handling a mind-boggling two-thirds of the world's telecommunications. Talk about having your finger on the pulse of the planet.
So we've got this legacy of connecting the world with wires, but where does radio fit into all of this?
That, my friend, is where John Mackay's son, Clarence, enters the picture.
Like father, like son.
You could say that. Clarence inherited his dad's communication genes, but he also had a knack for spotting the next big thing. And that next big thing, wireless.
He saw the writing on the wall, heard it in the airwaves, maybe.
Maybe so. This wireless craze was sweeping the globe, and Clarence, always the savvy businessman, established the Mackay Radio and Telegraph Company in 1925.
Talk about being ahead of the curve. It's incredible, isn't it? How these threads, seemingly unrelated, weave together to shape history, from silver mines to the airwaves.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that innovation often pops up in the most unexpected corners of the world.
Yeah.
And Nevada, with its Wild West spirit, was a breeding ground for out-of-the-box thinkers.
Speaking of unexpected innovators, let's introduce our listeners to Arthur G. Raycraft. Now, Raycraft wasn't a silver baron or a tech whiz.
Nope, he was a banker.
From Tonopah, of all places.
A town that practically screams Wild West, not exactly known for its cutting-edge technology.
Which, let's be honest, makes his story even more fascinating. In the early 1900s, long before radio was the entertainment hub it is today, he was tinkering away with this newfangled wireless telegraphy.
He had a vision, you see, to connect those far-flung mining camps scattered across Nevada, those tiny dots on the map separated by miles and miles of, well, nothing much.
This wasn't about entertainment or broadcasting the latest news. This was about solving a real-world problem, about connecting people in some of the most isolated and, let's be frank, dangerous places on Earth.
Exactly. Communication could mean the difference between life and death out there. Raycraft was a true pioneer. Building his equipment, stringing up those antennas, he was a one-man wireless revolution.
And as you might imagine, his story is full of those "you gotta be kidding me" moments. Like the time his transmitter was so powerful it blew out the entire power grid in Tonopah.
Can you imagine the headlines?
Banker's invention plunges town into darkness. But here's the thing about Raycraft. Setbacks didn't stop him.
Nope, they fueled him. He went on to found the Nevada Wireless Telegraph and Telephone Company, dedicated to connecting those remote communities no matter how tough the challenge.
So from Mackay connecting continents with wires to Raycraft connecting Nevada with wireless, it seems communication is woven into Nevada's DNA.
It certainly is. And as we'll soon discover, this was just the opening act. Nevada's radio story was about to get a whole lot louder.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, talked about the sparks of innovation that brought us to the cusp of radio in Nevada. But when did those airwaves really come alive? When did music, news, those voices in the air, when did that become a reality for Nevadans?
Well, let's cue the music. Because the year was 1922, in Reno, where a station with the call letters KDZK, they became Nevada's first official licensed broadcaster.
Reno in the Roaring '20s, huh? Can you imagine experiencing that through the magic of radio? I mean, what were those early broadcasts even like? Paint us a picture.
Picture this, saloons buzzing with that live music. Maybe a few of those newfangled crystal radio sets scattered about. But instead of the usual piano tunes, imagine the crackling sounds of a live jazz band piped in straight from some makeshift studio.
Now that's what I call history. Who were these guys? These pioneers bringing jazz to the desert airwaves.
Let me introduce you to the Broyley brothers, Frank and Julius. Frank was the engineering whiz, and Julius, he was the business brains of the operation.
A classic duo.
Right. They ran a company called Nevada Machinery and Electric, and these guys, they saw radio not just as this cool new tech, but as a wide-open opportunity, a chance to electrify the airwaves, so to speak. That entrepreneurial spirit, right, it's a Nevada tradition. But I imagine there were some, shall we say, challenges to getting a radio station up and running in those days.
Challenges? Oh, you have no idea. Imagine the logistical hurdles they had to overcome. Getting the equipment, often building it piecemeal, figuring out how to generate enough power, and then, of course, the constant battle with static and interference.
Sounds like the Wild West of radio.
You could say that. But the Broyley brothers, they were resourceful. They teamed up with a local theater, strung antennas across rooftops. And get this, they even figured out how to broadcast that live music straight from the stage. Now that's thinking outside the box. I'm starting to see why this isn't your typical history lesson. Live jazz from a Reno theater in 1922. That's a story for the ages. But did their ingenuity pay off? Did KDZK become a radio empire?
It had the potential. But the early days of radio were a lot more, well, chaotic than people realize. For instance, organizations like ASCAP, they were just starting to flex their muscles when it came to music licensing.
Ah, yes, copyright issues. Even back then, I can see how that would throw a wrench in the gears.
And Peter,
Sure.
picture this, saloons buzzing with that live music. Electrify the airwaves, so to speak. That entrepreneurial spirit, right, it's a Nevada tradition. But I imagine there were some, shall we say, challenges to getting a radio station up and running in those days.
Challenges? Oh, you have no idea. Imagine the logistical hurdles they had to overcome. Getting the equipment, often building it piecemeal, figuring out how to generate enough power, and then, of course, the constant battle with static and interference.
Sounds like the Wild West of radio.
You could say that. But the Broyley brothers, they were resourceful. They teamed up with a local theater, strung antennas across rooftops. And get this, they even figured out how to broadcast that live music straight from the stage. Now that's thinking outside the box. I'm starting to see why this isn't your typical history lesson. Live jazz from a Reno theater in 1922. That's a story for the ages. But did their ingenuity pay off? Did KDZK become a radio empire?
It had the potential. But the early days of radio were a lot more, well, chaotic than people realize. For instance, organizations like ASCAP, they were just starting to flex their muscles when it came to music licensing.
Ah, yes, copyright issues. Even back then, I can see how that would throw a wrench in the gears, especially for a small station just trying to find its footing.
Exactly. Plus, AT&T, they held patents on a lot of the technology used in those early transmitters. They wanted their cut, too. It was a constant financial struggle for those early pioneers.
So it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Sadly, no. By the summer of 1923, about a year after it launched, KDZK went silent, off the air. Their story, though, it reminds us that the path of innovation is rarely a straight line. For every success in those early days of radio, there were probably a dozen setbacks. But that's how progress happens, right?
Trial and error, the story of so many inventions. But while KDZK was struggling to survive, were there others out there, other stations trying to make their mark on those Nevada airwaves?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, while the Broyley brothers were grappling with licensing fees and whatnot, another station popped up in Reno. They called themselves KFAS, run by a fellow by the name of Hadley Beadle.
KFAS, what was their gig? More jazz.
KFAS. They were known for their, let's just say, eclectic taste. They reflected the anything-goes spirit of those early radio days. One of their most popular shows was called Psychic Wireless.
Hold on. Psychic Wireless. Okay, now you have to tell me more about this.
Imagine this. It featured this, well, occultist, I guess you'd call him, all the way from India. He believed there was a connection between telepathy and those radio waves. Think about it. Listeners huddled around their radios, trying to pick up psychic messages from across the globe.
That's wild. It really was a different time, wasn't it? It seems like people saw radio as this almost magical thing full of possibility.
Absolutely. They were pushing boundaries, exploring the unknown.
From live jazz to psychic connections, those early broadcasters were certainly a creative bunch. But was anyone trying to bring more traditional news and information to the airwaves?
Oh, for sure. And that's where another major player enters our story. KFFR.
KFFR. What makes them stand out from the crowd?
Well, for starters, KFFR was a joint effort between the Nevada State Journal, a big-time newspaper, and get this, Sparks High School.
A newspaper and a high school. Talk about an unlikely partnership. What was the driving force behind that collaboration?
Well, it just shows you how community-driven radio was back then. This station, it was the brainchild of this talented young engineer, Jim Kirk.
Jim Kirk. As in Captain Kirk. Going boldly where no radio has gone before.
You're on a roll with those names. Not quite the Starship Enterprise, but this Jim Kirk, he was just as passionate about connecting people. He even wrote a regular column about radio for the Nevada State Journal, sharing his knowledge with anyone who would listen.
Sounds like he was a bit of a local celebrity.
He was a true believer in the power of radio.
So what set KFFR apart from those other stations?
Remember those challenges KDZK faced with ASIC and those music licensing fees?
How could I forget? It was like trying to climb a mountain with a piano on their back.
Well, KFFR, they found a way around that whole mess. They decided to go all in on live local talent.
A bold move. No more big city jazz bands then.
Not for KFFR. They showcased the Sparks High School Orchestra, local musicians, even community events. They were determined to be a voice for their community, and that gave them a unique edge.
It's inspiring to see how these early stations adapted and innovated to overcome those challenges, to bring radio to the people. But of all the stations, all the names, there's one that really stands out as a giant of Nevada radio, KOH. Were they part of this early radio boom?
KOH, their story's a bit different, a bit more, well, cinematic, you could say. To understand their rise, we have to introduce you to another legend of Nevada radio, a man by the name of J.W. Peters.
J.W. Peters. Now, there's a name that's practically synonymous with KOH.
And for good reason.
You've definitely piqued my curiosity with this J.W. Peters. What was it about him that set him apart from those other radio trailblazers we've been talking about?
Well, Peters, he had this larger-than-life personality, natural broadcaster, you know. And he had a knack for spotting opportunity, for being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
He actually got his start in radio in California with this, get this, portable station called KGGM.
A portable station? Was he, like, hauling a transmitter around on a wagon train or something?
Close. It was the 1920s, so think more Model T than covered wagon. But yeah, he was determined to bring radio to the people no matter where they were. And it's here that his story takes this wild turn. Peters gets involved in this crazy publicity stunt called the Bunyan Derby.
The Bunyan Derby. Okay, you win. Now I have to hear more about this. It sounds equal parts fascinating and, well, painful.
Picture this. It's 1928. This promoter, Charlie Pyle, he's cooked up this idea for a cross-country foot race, right? Los Angeles to New York City.
Talk about a long walk.
Hundreds of runners pounding the pavement for weeks. And Jay Peters, he's right there with him in his mobile radio station, broadcasting every step of the way. Live updates, interviews, you name it.
Wow, now that's dedication. Trailing those runners, microphone in hand, he was a pioneer in more ways than one. So what happened? Did KGGM survive this Bunyan Derby?
That's where things take another turn. The truck and dies on him in New Mexico, bringing the whole Bunyan Derby adventure to a screeching halt.
Oh, no.
Yep. Peters ended up selling KGGM to some folks in Albuquerque and decided to set his sights on a new frontier, Reno, Nevada.
So that's how he ends up bringing his broadcasting talents to the Silver State?
Exactly. Reno, it had been without a local station for a while, and Peters, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to fill that void to bring music and news back to the airwaves.
So he saddles up, heads for Nevada, and...
He hits the ground running. It's 1928 when he arrives in Reno, rounds up some investors, and launches KOH.
KOH, the station that would become a Nevada icon. What was it about KOH that made it such a success?
Peters, he just had this instinct, you know. He understood that a good story, a connection with the audience, that was the key. And he was a showman, knew how to make a splash. He got him a prime spot for their transmitter right there at Blanchfield Airport.
Blanchfield Airport, that's where the National Automobile Museum is now, right?
The very same.
Yeah.
But back to KOH, they were the first in Nevada to really, truly embrace the business side of radio. Brought in advertisers, secured those network affiliations.
Yeah.
They even moved into this fancy new studio downtown.
It sounds like KOH wasn't just a radio station, it was an experience, a reflection of Reno itself.
Exactly. They embraced that slogan, the voice of Nevada, and they lived up to it. Local news, sports, community events, they covered it all. They brought this whole new level of sophistication to radio in Nevada.
And what about J.W. Peters? Did he stick around to enjoy KOH's success?
He was there for many years, a guiding force, you could say. But you know Peters, that adventurous spirit never really left him. He eventually moved on to become an airport lighting engineer, worked on projects all over the U.S. and even as far away as Peru.
From radio waves to runways, these pioneers sure knew how to keep things interesting. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. From silver mines to transatlantic cables, from jazz bands to psychic wireless and cross-country foot races, we've covered a lot of ground today.
It just goes to show you, doesn't it? The power of human ingenuity, the drive to connect, to explore. It's what led those early pioneers to bring radio to life in the Nevada desert.
And they didn't just bring sound to the airwaves. They built communities, sparked imaginations, created something truly special. Who knows what they'd make of today's world? Podcasts, streaming services, it's a whole new universe of sound.
It really is. But you know, the stories remind us that even with all this technology, that basic human desire, that need to share stories and connect, it never really goes away.
So well said. And on that note, we'll sign off for today. But before we go, we want to leave you with this. As you navigate this ever-changing world of technology, take a moment to remember those who came before. Those innovators, dreamers, and risk-takers who shaped the world around us. From the silver mines of the Comstock Lode to those crackling radio waves in the Nevada desert, their stories remind us that the power to connect, to innovate, to build something new, well, that's a story that never gets old. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those dials tuned for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.